Civilization has been a movement, and it started with the African civilization, the original Africans who lived on the planet. Not just Africans, but black people. They invented agriculture and the seasons around agriculture. They invented fire. And from that civilization, we went to the Asian civilization. These came up with a calendar. They had the mathematics. And then we went to the Arab civilization. The Arab civilization came in for the first time with what they call a world view. When we look at this Arab, we are looking at basically they had a basic religion called Islam. And these that had the religion called Islam, we can best read about the civilization through the writings of one scholar known Al-Hassan al-Banna. During this civilization, he said that Islam was a sword. It was an economic system, a religion, a belief system, a culture, freedom, justice, and all kinds of virtues. And the person who was the king, who was the Khalifa, was called an Amir Mu'minin, meaning that this kind of person was the God who oversaw God matters over spiritual nature and over physical nature. So for the first time in that history, we've seen those that developed farming, those that developed fire. Now we go to those that had a calendar. We see those that developed mathematics. Then we go to these ones that actually came and gave us a worldview. A view in which you see the world and you conduct yourself. And it came in, and an ideology, which is the same. An ideology meaning it is both, it is all those kinds of things that Al-Hassan al-Banna said. The Islamic civilization collapses when there is a battle of tools at the gate of Paris. One Charles Mato comes and fights the Islamic civilization commander called Abdul Rahman and kills him at the Battle of Tools. And that is now when we begin talking about the Western civilization that began and we are living in today. And during that time of the Battle of Tools and then that battle on the gates of Paris when Abdul Rahman was killed, now this one Charles Mato, who was the general leading the European kind of army, by the way, by then, the Ottoman and Istanbul and all those kinds of areas were all under Islamic civilization. And when the European system took over, now we see new developments. We see the development of time. We see the development of a clock by the Germans. And then we now go back to what I began with the other time, the words that came in line between 1848 and 1789. Renaissance, revolution, industrialization, the philosophers, everything came up which shaped the world in as far as intellectualism was concerned, and it was following the production process, invention of industry, in as far as it goes. And when we look at that, there were philosophies that also tell us, like I quoted Al-Hassan al-Banna during the Islamic civilization, we have scholars, during that time that tell us about the mindset of the people then and how we are during this time today. And this mindset was that there were people like Nietzsche, who I talked about as a philosopher earlier. He looked at the world and he said, look, now we have to think of how to create order in this chaos. This is revolution. There are so many groups of people and interest groups happening. We are having landlord system. We are having tax-based system during that time. Also, we are having the first time the scramble and partition of Africa. And the world's outside, not just Africa. And they are running and coming in to get all these so that they can go and energize the labor processes that they have in those civilizations where they come from. And we see philosophers now beginning to talk to us. And Nietzsche now begins his thought, his intellectual thought of how he was shaping even how these nations conduct themselves in Europe. He started telling them now, in order to bring order into this world, we have got to have a law. And this law is the one that is supposed to regulate us. But this law should, the person who is not under the law should be the person who is called Superman. This Superman is above the law. What he decides is what he does, and what he wants is what he does. So Nietzsche comes in as a philosopher and brings us this idea of Superman, which comes today as the modern term that we call the superpowers. And the law, which we call the law of nations, of which the United Nations is a part of all these kinds of thought. The economics that was describing the people that look, an Italian said, now look, the world is struggle for the fittest. You know, you have to find a way of how you put someone down and you get away. You just look after yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. A lot of thought came in that was saying, Karl Marx even was another one. Now he was saying, no, now let us get the production process. We put the resources together. We divide them amongst the classes and the poor. If we don't do that, there will be revolutions. Those that do not feel well and have a pressing condition will always overthrow the leaders. So we see that the ideas they had then, you can think they were describing the world in which we are today. And this is how we have been brainwashed also, to begin thinking in the same way. That we have the idea of Superman. This Superman decides his own rights and his own rules, meaning this Superman can even walk in your house and decide on what to do. We had America dreaming of itself and saying it is a manifest destiny. That was its foreign policy. That means it has a destiny from God to go and liberate the whole world. But we live in this century where America can easily go in anybody's house and get that person out, whether the people like it or they do not like it. We have an incident of Egypt where the minority overthrew the majority who are actually in governments. So we see that in a way it has shaped people's attitudes and the way they think about life and we've come to actually confuse issues. We've made politics to come to be called economics, and we've made economics to come to be called development, where one is not separate from the other. And in case where they are separate, they are also not giving us a human perspective that is giving us a way of how are people living in this world, and where have we failed and where are we not actually seeing. And this was also influenced. And then we look at how this civilization came up. They were Arab worlds, they were Asian worlds, and they still dealt with the current European countries. For this test, we are going to look at superpowers because we are looking already at a system that split them into Germany, into Britain, into USA, into China. China by then was a very good trader. It had what they call the multimedia super corridor highway, meaning roads and routes, even through water, that connected it to trade with the entire world. China, remember, by then wasn't involved in all those wars which had begun in the beginning, the First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War. So it had its money. So it would lend money to the United States. And it actually helped in the formation of the monetary system of the US. And when it made that monetary system, it did it by giving them historical notes, which were promissory notes, in order for these notes to be used within the economy of the United States of America. And then China now went into what China has become today. It is the only country that doesn't have a debt, and its financial and economic system has enough money to guarantee its entire population, and it can afford to lend and give credit and grants without even any hassle and having any press on its own system. So this China, as it developed, and then US said, now, how do we pay you back? Or we want our money, China says, look here, let us produce for you the commodities at our place, and let us be the ones to handle the production process. And then America said, no, what you're going to do, as you handle the production process, you're going to have to put our names on it, even if they are made in China. So production processes of clothes, of fabrics began during that time, as we are coming to the early 20th century, that we are made in China. But they were written on made in Kentucky. What did that mean? That China could get out engineers, 1 million. And these engineers would become a problem, because at the end of the day, they were too many and not having anything more to do. To date, China can manufacture, due to that intellectual property that it has, it can manufacture almost anything. They can make plastic rice. They can make a plastic egg. They can make almost anything you can think. Even where we are saying there is protein scarcity, they can make a flavor which smells like protein that will make the animals and livestock eat nothing, because they can duplicate it to that extent. So that is how China has also become a superpower in a dominance of what we call the Western civilization at the moment. It went a direction which was more or less socialist, but economically it was a capitalist in nature. So this is how these minds come up. And then at this point, someone can ask, as we see all this perspective, how has it affected the African countries? The truth is that we have got the residual effect. Because civilization is such that civilization progresses. When you don't progress, the foreigner buys and sells you. So we are talking of the time now which comes to Africa, and it's slavery. And if either they are taking you, or you're taking yourself and selling yourself and your time to work in another country and abandoning where you came from. And that is one of the issues of the way that civilizations has shaped the way the world is today.